Hi, I'm Michael. This is Lessons from the Screenplay. Phillip K. is well known for inspiring some of the greatest story worlds ever put on screen, and Minority Report is no exception. A radical, stunning vision of the future, Minority Report's world design continues to influence science fiction to this day. But the design of the technology isn't the most important part of the story world. When screenwriter Scott Frank was brought onto the project, director Steven Spielberg told him to ignore the tech and instead focus on the story itself.
The first thing that Steven said to me is, write this like it's happening today. If somebody answers a phone, they answer a phone. Don't describe the phone. If they get in a car, they get in a car. For the moment, let's just think about the story, which was a huge relief to me and made it much easier to think about things.
The concept of precrime, arresting people before they've actually committed a murder, is the important part of Minority Report's story world. The futuristic cars, jetpacks, and illogically transparent screens are just cool. So today I want to compare three versions of this story. Phillip K. Dick's original short story from 1956, Jon Cohen's 1997 script, and Scott Frank's final script, to explore how each tries to establish the philosophy of the story world, to look at how they attempt to persuade the audience to believe in the system of precrime, and examine how the story world itself becomes the antagonist of the story. Let's take a look at Minority Report. One of the most challenging aspects of screenwriting is providing exposition, defining the characters, history, and world of a story in a way that feels organic. Minority Report weaves in exposition about precrime in several environmental ways, from showing advertisements being broadcast in the city
on Tuesday, April 22nd, vote yes on the National Precrime Initiative,
to overhearing a tour being given to students.
Well, the precogs have such a powerful gift that they have to be kept in peaceful seclusion so as not to be distracted from the outside world.
But there's so much to explain that the film has to rely heavily on one of the most frequently used and effective exposition devices, introducing a character who is as clueless about the story world as the audience. In Minority Report, this character is Danny Whitwer. Whitwer serves as a kind of audience surrogate, and as he learns how precrime works, so do we.
The commission of the crime itself is absolute metaphysics. The precogs see the future and they're never wrong.
The problem with this technique, however, is that it's often not very dramatic. If one character's desire in a scene is to gain information, and the other's is to give it, there are no obstacles. No obstacles, no conflict, no drama. In his book, Into the Woods, John York writes, "All good exposition is disguised by making it dramatic, by injecting conflict. Desire in story structure should always be countered by an opposite desire, and this in turn creates the conflict drama needs." In Phillip K. Dick's original story, the character of Whitwer is used to convey exposition, but with very little conflict. In Jon Cohen's 1997 script, Whitwer is the partner and best friend of Anderton, or Anderson as he's called in this draft. So while Whitwer provides some conflict in challenging Anderson's beliefs, their interactions can still feel forced. But in Scott Frank's final script, the character of Danny Whitwer is cleverly used to both convey exposition and inject conflict into the story, because he's Anderton's opponent. Whitwer is a Department of Justice agent sent to audit precrime before it's adopted as a nationwide practice. So Whitwer is looking for flaws.
It's not the future if you stop it. Isn't that a fundamental paradox?
Which results in Anderton having to not just explain precrime, but to defend it.
Why'd you catch that? Because it was gonna fall.
You're certain?
Yeah, but it didn't fall. You caught it. The fact that you prevented it from happening doesn't change the fact that it was going to happen.
Forcing Anderton to actively defend precrime is important, because in Minority Report, the audience has to do more than simply understand the world. The audience must buy into the world. The concept of arresting people before they've committed a crime relies on the idea that the future is predetermined and there is no free will. This is a philosophy that is contrary to what many people believe, so the filmmakers must help the audience suspend their disbelief and embrace the laws of the story world. The first way Minority Report achieves this is by showing us the prevention of a murder which we can confidently agree was going to take place. Showing Precrime at its best helps the audience understand and believe in its value.
I'm placing you under arrest for the future murder of Sarah Marks and Donald Dubin that was take place today, April 22nd, at 0800 hours and 4 minutes. No.
But Minority Report also creates an emotional connection to the story world. Screenwriter Scott Frank did this by giving Anderton a personal reason to believe in it, saying, the main character had to be running from something or acting out some personal problem for it to really work. So, what if Anderton was a policeman before Precrime and experienced the loss of his own child right in front of him? I thought that anger and guilt would lead to a denial for the character in terms of what he was doing, and that might give him some real motivation and make things interesting.
Sean!
In both the original story and Jon Cohen's script, Anderton is the founder and director of Precrime. Therefore, his belief in the system is self-evident and never explained in depth, so the audience is asked to accept the system but doesn't connect with it emotionally. But by giving Anderton a tragic backstory, one he believes could have been avoided had Precrime existed at the time of his son's disappearance, the audience is compelled to feel empathy for Anderton and see the merit of the story world's philosophy. At least, for a while.
You're not gonna kill me.
Goodbye, Crow.
Wait!
When Anderton discovers that he has been convicted of a future murder, his beliefs get turned upside down, and the story world becomes the antagonist. There are two central opponent characters in Minority Report: Witwer, who eventually comes to believe Anderton, and Lamar Burgess, founder of Precrime. But Anderton's desire is much greater than simply stopping these bad guys. In the second act of the story, Anderton learns that the precogs, the gifted humans who can see the future, aren't always in agreement.
Most of the time, all three precognitives will see an event in the same way, but once in a while, one of them will see things differently than the other two.
Are you saying I've haloed innocent people?
I'm saying that every so often, those accused of a precrime might have an alternate future.
As director Steven Spielberg says,
if one of the precogs dissents and casts a dissenting vote, then it can't be a perfect system. And there must be something wrong with it, and something so wrong that the system would not be allowed to exist in our nation.
And so Anderton's desire becomes clear: dismantle Precrime. In every version of the story, the resolution is centered around the fate of the Precrime system itself. In Phillip K. Dick's original story, Anderton recognizes the flaw in Precrime, but he takes action to make sure the system actually prevails. Or, as screenwriter Scott Frank charmingly puts it, in the end of Dick's story, the hero sacrifices himself for this completely fascist system of law enforcement. He's set up by some guy in the army you don't know or even care about for reasons that aren't at all clear. Then it ends. The system of Precrime lives on. In Jon Cohen's script, Witwer wants Anderson to kill him in order to prove Precrime works, but Anderson makes every effort not to follow through. But when Witwer takes one of the male precogs and tries to kill him, Anderson has no choice but to shoot. In this version of the story, the fate of Precrime is unclear. Interestingly, the concept of Minority Reports is never even mentioned, so Cohen never makes a decision about the state of free will. Scott Frank's final script finds a balance between these concepts. In his final moments, Burgess, who the Precrime unit sees murdering Anderton, takes his own life. The fact that he chose not to murder Anderton, as was foreseen by the Precrime system, shows that there is indeed free will in this story world. So while Burgess is the main opponent for Anderton, his demise alone doesn't solve the greater problem. It's not until we see the dissolution of the story world as Precrime is dismantled that we can feel the story has truly been resolved. Minority Report is a great example of how the world of a story can be more than just a fun or interesting setting. It demonstrates how creating characters with opposing views on the world's philosophy can help elegantly convey exposition and persuade the audience to buy into the world's systems. And it shows how the story world itself can be the primary source of conflict, so that by the end, we only feel satisfied when Anderton brings down the system with the help of a Minority Report. A lot of the technology and concepts predicted in Minority Report have come true, and then some.
Get away, John Anderton. Forget your troubles.
There's a documentary that looks at Philip K. Dick's works and their film adaptations to explore the ways his visions of the future have come true. It's called The Worlds of Philip K. Dick, and it's one of the many great documentaries available on CuriosityStream. CuriosityStream is a subscription streaming service made for people who love to learn. They have over 2,400 documentaries and nonfiction titles from some of the world's best filmmakers, including exclusive originals. You can get unlimited access starting at just $2.99 a month, and you can get the first 31 days completely free if you sign up at curiositystream.com/LFTS and use the promo code LFTS during the sign-up process. Thanks to CuriosityStream for sponsoring this episode. Hey guys, hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to make sure that you never miss one of our uploads, be sure to ring the bell. According to Veritasium's latest video, that's the only way to ensure that you're notified when a channel uploads a new video. So go ahead and hit the bell icon to make sure you never miss an episode of Lessons from the Screenplay. Thank you to the patrons on Patreon and supporters here on YouTube for making this channel possible. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.